Good afternoon and welcome to this very special program of Elections 2020 Update. Previously, we referred to this program as Recount Update. For all intents and purposes, the recount is all but concluded. I have the distinct honor of having with me for today's discussion PPPC candidate, attorney at law, Ms. Priya Manickchand. Priya, welcome to today's program.
Hi, Michael. How are you? I'm very glad to be here with you on this last day of the recount.
Okay, and we are all happy that the recount is practically wound down. But what I'm going to begin, and of course, I'm your host, Michael Gordon. This program is specially brought to you by the People's Progressive Party Civic. Priya, could you give me, for the sake of our viewers, listeners, the current state of play of what's happening based on your knowledge? I know you're not there at the Artichoke Conference Center.
Right. So I'm very glad today is like anything else when you begin something, a hard workout, studying for an exam, a pregnancy, anything, you don't really see the end, and then that end gets there and you experience it. Well, that's what I think Guyana is doing today, breathing finally. The recount is finished. The counting of the ballots will be finished shortly. The last ballot box was just taken out of the container and taken into the recount station. But there's been a lapse between the actual tally, the count, and the tabulation of that count. For example, Region 6 was finished counting several days ago, and it's only today that the tabulation, the certificate of the certification of that recount was issued. So there will still be some work to do in the tabulation center, but the recount is going to be finished shortly in under an hour. I predict we're going to be done with recounting all the ballots. And what has that told us? That tells us exactly what we knew on the night of March 2nd, but what we could have guessed even before March 2nd, and that is that the people were going to be critical of the leadership and service of the AP and UAFC, and they would reflect that in their vote. So we knew since the 3rd of March, and definitely by the 5th of March, that the PPP had won the elections. Reasonable people in the country knew that, and it was the AP and UAFC that did everything in their power to stop that reality becoming known. So I'm just saying that Guyana could finally breathe because we have confirmed for ourselves, and we didn't imagine any of this, what we knew. And that is that the people of Guyana have chosen in a responsible, informed way, the People's Progressive Party Civic to lead it with Irfan Ali as its president and Mark Phillips as its vice president. Prime minister. And we expect that to happen soon. In fact, the New and United Guyana has already conceded to Irfan Ali and congratulated him and the PPPC on a victory. And that was even before the last box was counted, because by the time we had gotten to 4 to 50 boxes, the lead was unassailable. What that means is if you had given the AP and you every single vote in those last boxes, the PPPC would still have won the election. Of course, we can't do that because important is to make sure each ballot, each person who went out and cast their ballot, that they're not disenfranchised and that their voice is heard in that count and their will is given effect to. And so you can't give up at that point. But we knew since about 40 boxes ago that the lead was unassailable. So the PPP is going to win this election with about with in excess of 15,000 votes.
Well, you noted that we knew. I want to add too that APNU AFC knew. The Guyana elections, by way of their statements of poll, knew. And those are the same statements of poll which was given to the PPP that we published. Right. It's the same statements of poll that were given to APNU AFC. So it is, make no mistake, if there is any perception that it was not known by the APNU AFC administration, every Guyanese who are under that impression needs to disabuse his or her mind from any perception that this was so, and APNU AFC really did not know who won, or they are unaware of what transpired in the tabulation of District 4 votes by returning officer Claremont Mingo.
Right, and so you remember, I don't mean to say I told you so, but we need to point these things out because it's a matter of it's a trust issue. You may recall that when the PPP published the statements of poll that were issued by GECOM on its website, on a website, they had leaders of the APNU AFC, David Patterson, Catherine Hughes, Kemraj Ramjatan, Harman, Valda Lawrence, people coming out and saying, oh, those are not real. We have the real ones. We're not showing you them. We have the real ones in the AP and UAFC. The PPP ones that they published there, they're not real. Well, I just want to point out to the whole of Guyana and the entire world that what was in the statements of poll published by the PPP is almost at a 99.6% accuracy that is reflected in the recount. Where there are changes is where a vote was given for the PPP when on the night of election, the presiding officer didn't recognize that vote. We're very, very minimal. The point I'm making is at the beginning of this process, what the PPPC told this nation has turned out to be the truth. Very expensive exercise in proving that. But we are the party you can trust. We're the party you can believe. The APNU, the AFC, and individually, the APNU, PNC, and AFC all came out with stories that were so stretched, and they fooled some of their supporters, and that is reprehensible because these are Guyanese people, and they should be upset that they weren't even trusted with the truth, that they were lied to, they were made fools of, and they should treat just like all of us. When somebody lies to us, we get very upset. They should be very upset with their leaders for lying to them.
Okay, this brings
but
us
it's
to
a good thing.
This brings us to another point. At the close of poll on March 2nd, the mantra that was being beaten, this election was free, it was fair, it was credible. How does one move from there to the plethora of ridiculous discrepancies being raised now by, alleged discrepancies being raised now by APNU AFC? GECOM.
Right, so let's be clear. On election night, the day after election, a few days after election, every single person, every single stakeholder, the president of Guyana and the presidential candidate of the AP and UAFC, Basil Williams, its Attorney General, Ramjatan, Kathy Hughes, Moses Nagamutu, Bara Jackdale, Irfan Ali, Timothy Jonas, Ray Lam, everybody said that these elections, local stakeholders, elections were free and fair and orderly ran, and they're very happy with the process that happened on the 2nd, throughout the day of the 2nd and the night of the 2nd. All our international observers, the ABC countries, the Commonwealth Observer Group, the OAS Observer Group, the CARICOM Observer Group, everybody that observed these elections that was international, that had an international touch or flavor, they all said that the elections, the Carter Center, were properly run, properly managed, went very smoothly, went very orderly. People were allowed to exercise their right to select a government. Our local observers, the Private Sector Commission, the Ghana Bar Association, the American Chamber of Commerce, everybody said these elections were free, fair, transparent, and free from fear. And indeed, the elections were and remain free, fair, transparent, and until APNU introduced its threats and so on, free from fear. So the election day process, we have concluded nationally and internationally that the day of election, the process was fair, the process was free. The process was what elections across the world are expected to look like in a democracy. That hasn't changed. Nothing that has happened over the last 3 months, we're going to 14 weeks tomorrow, has changed that reality. We have the APNU, AFC, very small number of its leaders, making some extremely ridiculous claims, such as that dead people voted, that people who migrated voted, that people who are non-existent voted. Those claims have been debunked and disproved, I believe, to the satisfaction of most reasonable people. People who they claimed were dead have come forward and said, look, here I am. I'm right here. People beating their chest. Look, me there right here. I'm not dead. You know, some people could take that as a bad omen, that people calling death on them and so on. People go and do a puja and so, just to, you know, ward off that evil that was sent their way. People came forward with affidavits. Now, an affidavit is a very strong thing. It's an oath. And if you lie, you could be jailed. You could get into trouble for perjury and you could get jailed. People have put themselves on the line and come forward by way of affidavit and said, look, here I am. I was here all the time. I did not migrate. I was stunned this afternoon to hear Vincent Alexander at a press conference saying, well, they didn't come to us. They went to the newspapers and told them they're alive. And they went to the newspapers and told them they were in the country. I consider that propaganda. So until they come to GECOM and say they're alive, we will treat them as though they're dead. That is the kind of foolishness you're hearing. That's the kind of unreasonableness you're hearing. And you know how that sounded to you? As stupid as that sounded to you is how it's sounding to the rest of the nation. It's how it's sounding to the international people who are looking on at what we're doing, who are observing what's happening here. And so those allegations and those things that have been raised as discrepancies and abnormalities in the process have been done so particularly with a view to discrediting the process. It's really just sore losing. Is you went to the cricket match, you can't make the number of runs you need to make. And so at the end of it, you pick up your bat and you start beat up everybody on the field and hope that people drop down and fall down and so on. And you could run away and claim that you win. That's not it. You can't do that in a 2020 world. Not when cameras are rolling, not when people are sensible, not when people can share information. Last night, I saw a young professional. I do not know her personally. Ramona Chandrabali. She chose to go and consult with a lawyer. She has to pay for that and get a statement written for her because she was browsing casually and came across her name on a list of persons who were alleged to have migrated. And she's saying, I am not only a local scientist, I'm internationally known, and you have just accused me, the police commissioner no less, of electoral fraud. And I would like this to be explained to me, and I'd like to clear my name. Mr. Alexander, on behalf of the PNC and the AP and UAFC, is suggesting that what she said there, because she didn't walk in and puja him while she was giving him that information, that is not real. He will still continue to treat her as absent from Guyana on
until
election
she presents herself to him.
And I suppose God knows do what else to him when to be able to prove to him that she's alive and well and was in the country on this day. Well, not in this country, not in this Guyana. So Mr. Alexander belongs to another era, and he would be well advised to understand that the people of Guyana are not going to tolerate that sort of insult repeatedly to our young people. This girl's a young girl. She looks very young. She's in the sciences. You know exactly what we need for this country. People who are going to stay here and build. We're insulting them. And so Michael Dawes claims, in my view, the APNU conceded this afternoon at about 3 something when they issued a statement to say that they were not going to, what was it they said? They were not going to recognize those votes from the ballot boxes that had some missing documents. That for me was a concession, because if you're going to win an election and you know you're winning an election, you don't say you're not going to recognize the results. So for me, that was a concession from them.
I want to be clear and unequivocal about it. Even though the ballot boxes are purportedly, from what everyone is referring to as PPP strongholds, not every vote in those ballot boxes are for the People's Progressive Party.
Not at all. In fact,
I would suppose dozens of votes are for the APNU FC. So it is as though they're unconcerned about even who supported them. You see, they're unconcerned about their own Polynesians. They are saying, the APNU AFC are now saying that 70,000 votes, practically 70,000 votes only in Guyana are valid. You're now saying to 400,000 Guyanese, you're either, based on their arguments, you're either dead out of the jurisdiction or we're out of the country. Right. You said, you spoke about the ridiculousness of these claims. Priya, I'm not going to mince words. It has gone to the level, it has sunk to the level of stupidity.
And that is what is sad. Let me tell you something. When you say only 70,000 votes in this country are valid, and you have a country like Guyana where everybody knows everybody, and in a village, let's take somewhere like Maruka or Maikoni, everybody knows everybody up there. You're going to tell somebody from Maruka that their village people don't exist, and then you expect the people of Maruka to believe you and trust you and have regard and respect for you. So they're saying that 300 and something thousand votes are invalid because people didn't exist or somebody else voted for them, or that kind of silliness. It's not going to catch on. But what it does for us, for me, is it tells us where they might be going. These are not people who are prepared to say, you know what, the people of Guyana have learned that they could switch out their governments if the government doesn't serve them. And just like how they changed the PPP in 2015, they will change the PPP again in 2025. So let's head into the opposition and start working. This is not the kind of people we see. We see people of the Granger era. I mean, he's an old man, let's face it. Him and Alexander and these people who came from the Burnham era, where they understand that you can get power. They so have no confidence in themselves and in their own ability to lead that they believe they have to trick and rob the people of this country into putting them in office. They don't believe that they can go to the people with proper policies, that they can go to the people with promises, that they can go to the people with a track record, because they have none now.
Well, there's none. I was about to say there's none.
Right. So you rob the people of Guyana and believe you can trick them into staying in office. Well, I want to say that nobody in this country is going to let an illegitimate president stay in office and run Guyana. And I'm happy to say that our international peers and partners and allies are not going to allow it either. So with the end of the recount today, where the numbers are very similar to the numbers that the PPP had on election night, that the GECOM had issued to us on election night, with the numbers so very similar. What we have is PPPC victory. We have already switched out our heads into how we're going to deliver on those promises we made, because it's a very serious time in the country, Michael. It's as you know, we have COVID that we're dealing with. We have common entrance issues that we're dealing with. We have people who can't eat because they have not been able to work for the last 2 or 3 months. There are very serious things that have to be addressed. We have an economy that is in a tailspin and has hit ground a long time ago. It's quite frightening, really, that we could be in this state where people who have foisted themselves on us as leaders and have held themselves in office are not even addressing those issues. So the PPP has already begun to, a while now, not now, address how we're going to implement those promises we made. We're ready to start. So I'd like to see Mr. Lowenfield present his report in as little time as possible. I don't think there's much that he has to do, because as you know, as this recount was happening, after every region was finished, it was publicly shown, publicly declared. I mean, GECOM didn't step forward and declare it, but I don't know how they can walk away from those certificates of declaration. So we will hand to Mr. Lowenfield at the end of this process 10 certificates, and by we I mean the recount process, which had eagle eyes on it all the time. We will be giving to Mr. Lowenfield 10 certificates, and all you gotta do is sit down with a calculator and add it up. If he's from the old school and he doesn't use a calculator, a pencil and a paper, and he's going to have to add up so much the PPP gets, so much the PNC gets, so much people cast their votes. These are the winners, and then they calculate how many people, how many seats, how many votes would be equivalent to a seat, who got how many seats. That should not take him very long. In any event, the longest it could take him is till the 13th, because there is an order that GECOM had agreed to and crafted itself. And that order says that Mr. Lowenfield has to give his report on or before the 13th of
16th,
June.
I think. The 16th.
No, the 13th. And then the commission then has until the 16th to consider it and make a declaration. So we're just 1 week short, I believe, of putting this matter behind us and starting to write about it so that we never get here again?
Priya, you raised a very interesting issue as it relates to the forward thrust of Guyana, a PPP government led by Dr. Irfan Ali. And we've seen him from time to time. He has, and you're right, he has practically switched out of the current issue. Of course, we had and have competent people addressing those. He have begun to gear his mind to the whole notion of executive governance and where we go from here. And he has been discussing many things, which includes aid packages for the citizens of Guyana and so many other things, how businesses are enabled to continue without crumbling, so many other aspects of Guyana's future's development. And it's an issue I'm sure we could ventilate in an hour at some separate occasion. But I want to bring us back to the issue at hand and the claims that continue to be made even today by APNU AFC counting agents and their perception and the belief, because I have been listening to, there is some representation practically 24 hours by APNU AFC just outside the conference center, where there is that expectation that GECOM will act on these observations. We all know the observations can be acted on, but in the court of law, there is no court called GECOM.
Right. So let me just say, I think for GECOM coming out of this recount exercise, while the country and people should not have been put in a position of having to engage in the this expense and this trauma of going through it, having gone through it, I'm sure GECOM has found administrative things they could correct and do better and fine tune, and I expect them to be doing that for the next election and so on. But GECOM cannot investigate GECOM. What that means is a very, very simple principle. A man can't be a judge in his own cause. And why can't he be a judge in his own cause? Because people don't believe he would be fair. It is likely that he is going to be biased towards himself and not want to expose his faults and flaws. And outside of whether he could be fair, people wouldn't think that he's fair. So the perception would be there that he is not fair if he's a judge in his own cause. So extending that to GECOM, GECOM can't sit down and decide if GECOM did something wrong or right and whether GECOM was at fault or not. And everything, GECOM ran this process. So I know the APNU has spent a lot of man hours exploiting a lot of young people and their time to say, point these, whatever irregularities might have happened towards the PPPC. Now, we want to be very clear. There would have been irregularities in the 2020 elections. There'd be irregularities in every election. There are irregularities. What is an irregularity? Somebody forget to put a stamp pad in a box. Somebody didn't take a name on a list. You know, you sit down there, you're supposed to take this name as an admin kind of check and balance, and then your phone rings and you get distracted, you forget to take one name. That doesn't invalidate all the votes in that box. It cannot speak to whether people actually came and voted and so on. Every election in every country, the US, Canada, the UK, Iran, France, everybody, there will be small irregularities because there are people manning those systems. And when you have a large enough collection of people, you'll have some delinquents among them, whether deliberate or negligent. The issue is whether those irregularities are big enough, large enough in numerical value to change the election result. And we are saying very clearly that whoever forget to put a stamp pad in a box, whoever forget to put a seal, whichever, that those kinds of things can't really invalidate what people went out there and did. And they won't. In any event, whether they will or they won't, what we're certain about is that GECOM cannot determine whether GECOM staff did something wrong. And if we were unsure, Michael, let's look at Mr. Mingo. This whole country, this whole world knows Claremont Mingo's name, not in a good way, because he's associated and identified with theft and fraud and illegalities and dishonesty. Mr. Mingo has been proven repeatedly in this period over 400 times, frankly, to have been someone who used false and inflated numbers for the AP and UAFC and took away numbers from the PPPC. Mr. Mingo is an employee of GECOM. He still is, so we're still paying him. That's very painful, actually. Mr. Mingo is an employee of GECOM, and he is been proven over the last 33 days in this recount to have done wrong, and GECOM has not begun. They've never issued a reprimand to him. They've never begun to investigate him. They haven't even sent him on admin leave. They have him on the job in Region 5. If GECOM cannot be trusted, people would not trust them to determine fairly any investigation GECOM undertakes. And that is why this recount process was to determine how many votes were cast and how many ballots were cast and who get the most votes in this process. And that has been determined today. The PPPC would have gotten more votes, 15,000 times, than the AP and UAFC. And so if there are complaints that a ballot stamp pad was missing, or some person didn't put a list into the ballot box, that has to be taken to the High Court, where our laws are very clear that any question about the validity of an election, the High Court has sole responsibility and jurisdiction in determining who was at fault and whether that would invalidate the entire election. Whoever takes it to the High Court has two burdens. One, that fraud was committed, and then two, or that irregularities happened, and then two, that those amounted to so much that it would have changed the outcome of the election. I have no doubt in my mind that neither will be something the AP and UAFC could prove, but I will not take away from them their right to approach the court. They could go waste their time if they want, but that's where it happens, not at GECOM.
Your time is practically gone, and I'm going to put you on the spot. What would you say to the electorate of Guyana at this juncture? And this includes, what the electorate includes, supporters of both of the major parties, all of the parties.
Yeah. Of course. Look, I would say this. The people, all of us went to the election. We all had people we preferred to be in office for different reasons. You like this one better, you grew up with that one, you like this one's policies better. And those elections were contested. And I'll confess to you, when I saw some people involved in the process who had nothing to do with the PPP, they were with other parties, I was excited. I was glad that people were involved in this this piece of our democracy. People are involved in the process. People were passionate.
Ownership. Ownership.
Yeah, people who had a lot of energy. We went to these elections. The issue is about who is going to be a better leader. Those issues were ventilated and interrogated by the people of this country. And the majority of the people of this country said they wanted one political party, the PPPC, to govern. The People's Progressive Party has said very clearly, part of why people might have chosen that party is because the party has said very clearly that one of the undertakings that will happen when it assumes office is to examine how we can engage the entire population and political parties and other stakeholders in having a more inclusive Guyana, governed Guyana. And that is one of the undertakings that will happen. I want to assure people, whether you voted for the PNC or the APNU or ANOG or the TCI or the PPP, whether you're Hindu, Christian, or Muslim, or you're a Rasta, whether you're male or female, whether you're living in a rural country or in a rural society or in towns, whether you are Indian or Black or Amerindian or Chinese, whatever it is, the PPP, once it assumes office, we're not going to have those differences divide Guyana. We're going to ensure that we use all those differences to make sure we have a nice melting pot of using all our talents. The PPPC is going to govern for all of Guyana. I am aware, and I think it would be, I can't failed to address it. I'm aware that some people thought we might not have served them as properly as we should have when we were in office before. Sometimes I believe we didn't speak enough about how we were serving. So I'm not sure whether I would concede that that was not done or if I would say we had a perception problem. But we have learned. We have learned both that we need to speak a little bit more. Sometimes you get so caught up with governing, Michael, that you forget these dissemination of information is just as important, and the involvement of people and so on could be equally important as delivery of services, and then how those
Absolutely.
services are delivered.
Absolutely.
So we learned
Perception.
some lessons,
Yes.
and we're going to implement those lessons when we were in office. I mean, at the time that we were out gave us some time also to see how, while you may have the best policies and you may actually be investing in tons of services and goods, it might not actually be reaching people the way we intended to when we sat at that cabinet and we decided to do some of these programs. So some of those things we've learned and we've seen and we've had time to cogitate and think about. And so I want to tell everybody, and I'm very serious, our solemn promise that PPPC is going to be a party that a government that governs for all of Guyana without separating people and how they should receive services based on how they voted. This is over. We know more than most that the people of the supporters of the AP and UAFC suffered equally like the supporters of the PPPC, like the supporters of the ANUG, like people who didn't vote in these last 2 months when we've had COVID on the ground here. And so we know that this here that happened is really a small cabal in the leadership of the AP and UAFC. Small, I don't think they number more than 40. And maybe another number like that of their very close friends who put this country through this. And so the ordinary people of this country are not going to be are not, we don't blame them for what happened here, and they're not going to feel any brunt of that at all. They're going to enjoy the service that the PPPC will give equally and equitably across this country. We really look forward to doing that.
PPPC candidate Priya Manickchand, thanks again for being a part of this program. Looking forward to doing this again. I'm your host, Michael Gordon. Thanks for joining us.